In the very first class of sociology, you are often asked this question: what is sociology? Many of you think it is an easy question, isn't it? Sociology is about society. What else? That's not wrong, but it is not quite right either. After all, many people deal with society. Politicians make policies for society. Journalists, they report what's going on in society. And there are psychologists who try to fix people's behavior who are members of society. There are historians too who tell the story of society. So, are they all sociologists? No. So, what makes sociology different? What is special about the way sociologists understand society? Answering these questions is somewhat difficult because sociology has a very wide scope. It studies almost every aspect of human life. And then, different sociologists have studied different sides of society, different aspects of society. They have defined sociology and society very differently. And sometimes they even disagreed with one another. So let me be honest with you. When it comes to answer what is sociology, most teachers, including me, often get away by repeating one of those dry textbook definitions of sociology. Something that goes like this: sociology is the scientific study of society, social structures, institutions, patterns of social relationships, social interaction, culture, social change, and so on. You are told to memorize these lines, and in exams, you just write whatever you remember. Half a sentence here, a few words there. Even I don't remember which definition I memorized during my undergraduate days. So when someone asks me today what is sociology, I still fumble. I try to sound smart, but I find myself not saying anything clearly. If you have ever felt like this, you are not alone. So here is my promise to you: by the end of this video, you will have one single powerful definition of sociology, a definition that you can memorize, understand, and expand on confidently if someone asks you in class or in any interview. So let's start. Let's start with what is not sociology. Sociology is definitely not about gossiping with big words. You must have seen people saying, our generation has lost values, or society has become too modern. So many people talk about society. They are thoughtful, they are observant, and they try to describe and explain what they are seeing around themselves. But these are, after all, opinions. No matter how well thought, well considered they are just opinions. This is not sociology. Sociology is also not activism or journalism. Although sociologists often care about social injustices and social change, but simply reporting does not amount to doing sociology. For example, a journalist reports that child labor is rising, and somehow she exposes places where children are made to work. Here, a sociologist has to ask why child labor continues even though we have laws against it, we have policies that promote education and child welfare. So sociologist goes a step further. Sociology is also not about sitting in cafes and arguing endlessly about privilege, gender, identity, topics that are usually discussed among educated people these days. So that's not sociology. That's at best Twitter, or as they have renamed it, X. There is one more thing sociology is not. It is not common sense. Now this surprises a lot of people because common sense also talks about society, right? So we have commonsensical things like boys are naturally better at maths, or poor people are lazy people, or in the Indian context particularly we say joint families are happier than nuclear families. We hear these statements all the time. They sound obvious, familiar, and that's exactly the problem. Common sense is based on everyday experience and personal belief. It often repeats what people already think, but we don't question why they think that way. Sociology begins where common sense stops. It asks, is this really true for everyone, in all contexts? It doesn't just accept what appears normal, it investigates it. For example, common sense says, hard work always brings success. Sociology would say here, let's test that. What about two people who work equally hard, but one has access to better education, family wealth, or social networks? Sociology points out that success is not only about effort, it is also about opportunity, privilege. So the difference is clear. Common sense gives ready-made answers. Sociology asks uncomfortable questions. It seeks to investigate further. Sociology is also not the same as other social sciences, although there are areas of overlap. History studies what happened in the past, the sequence of events, what came after what, and the causes behind those events. Sociology, on the other hand, focuses more on the present. But to understand how society works today, sociologists have to look back at the past because the past lives inside the present. There are many things we used to do long ago and we still continue to do them, like marriage, rituals, festivals. There are ways of addressing elders that still continue. And there are things we have stopped doing, like arranged child marriage, untouchability, things like that. Some of these things disappeared gradually, and some of these things disappeared through struggle and reform. So while history's primary focus is the past, sociology's primary focus is the present. History often studies unique events, when something happened and why. For example, the French Revolution or the Industrial Revolution. It describes how societies changed at particular points in time. Sociology, instead, looks for general patterns behind such changes. It asks, why do revolutions happen in many societies? What common forces like inequality, technology, or ideas push people to change the world they live in? Psychology studies what happens inside the human mind, our thoughts, emotions, memories, fears, motivations, things like that. A psychologist might ask, why does this person feel anxious or lonely? And look for answers within the individual, their personality, childhood experiences, or brain chemistry. Sociology looks around the person, at the social conditions that shape those feelings. For example, it might ask, why are so many people feeling anxious and lonely these days? Sociology explores how urban life, competition, or social media create isolation or pressure for entire groups. While psychology looks inward to understand the person, sociology looks outward to understand the pattern. Economics studies how goods and wealth are produced, distributed, and consumed. In short, how people make a living. An economist might ask, how does inflation affect spending? Or how can we increase national income? Sociology is less concerned with money itself and more concerned with the meaning and impact of economic life. It asks questions like, why do some jobs earn more respect than others? How does poverty affect a person's dignity or social standing? For example, an economist might calculate how much a sanitation worker contributes to the economy. Here a sociologist would ask, why that work, sanitation work, though essential, is still looked down upon? Economics studies value and production, while sociology studies meaning and power. So you see, sociology touches the same world that history, psychology, and economics explore. But it asks different kinds of questions. It does not just describe what people do, it asks why they do it that way. For example, why do we marry within our community? Why do some jobs get more respect than others? Why do we follow certain rules even when no one is forcing us to do? Sociology tries to make sense of these patterns. So what is sociology then? Sociology is the study of how our lives are connected to each other, to the groups we belong to, and to the larger systems that guide or limit what we can do. When you start to notice these connections, you begin to see that nothing we do is truly just personal. The language we speak, the clothes we wear, the dreams we chase, all carry traces of culture, class, gender, and history. That's why we say sociology is not just about society out there, it is also about the society inside us. For example, when someone says, I chose my career freely, a sociologist here might ask her, what kind of choices were actually available to you? How did your family expectations, class background, or your gender impact those choices? Or take something as simple as friendship. We think we just find people we vibe with. But if you notice carefully, our friendships often follow social lines. Language, caste, religion, lifestyle, education. Even our sense of who feels comfortable is learned from the society we grew up in. Sociology helps uncover these invisible threads, the patterns we live inside, without always being aware of them. In that sense, sociology is not just the study of society, it is a way of seeing the world around us and the world within us. That's what makes sociology so interesting. It turns the ordinary into something worth questioning. Once you start seeing like a sociologist, you will find there is no such thing as just normal. Everything becomes a clue, a hint of how society works through us. Now that we understand the essence of what sociology is, let's try to arrive at a definition. If you open any sociology textbook, you will find pages and pages of definitions. And honestly, that can be confusing. Students often ask, which one should I memorize for the exam? Let's have a look at some of these definitions and try to understand what they are trying to say. Some definitions are very formal and dry, like this one. Sociology studies society, including patterns of social relationships, social interaction, and culture. Then there are some definitions that are very broad and inclusive, like sociology is the study of social life, social change, and the social causes and consequences of human behavior. And then there are definitions of sociology and society offered by the classical theorists, and they usually stressed one side of the story more than the other. For example, Auguste Comte, who coined the word sociology. He called sociology the scientific study of society. Here the key word is scientific study. Max Weber defined sociology as the study of social action. The key word here is social action. Weber wanted to understand the meanings people attach to what they do. Emile Durkheim said sociology studies social facts. The key word here is social facts, the external norms and institutions that shape our actions. Simmel stressed on the interaction part. He said sociology is the study of social groups based on interaction. So yes, there are many definitions, and they can sound like different languages at first, but if you listen carefully, they are all describing the same world from different vantage points. Each definition highlights a piece of the puzzle. Comte talked about science and order, Weber talked about meaning, Durkheim stressed on structure, and Simmel stressed on interaction. Together, they tell us that sociology studies how human beings live, relate, and change together. You don't have to memorize every definition. What matters is the spirit behind them. That sociology is both a science and a perspective, a way of looking at how individual lives and social structures are always intertwined. So here is a definition you can remember, understand, and expand. Sociology is the study of how human beings live together, how we connect through relationships, organize life through institutions, experience inequality and power, and reshape society through change. Now, this definition seems very long, but be with me, I will unpack it and you will never forget how to expand on this definition in future. This one sentence captures a lot of things: how we live, how we organize, how we struggle, and how we evolve or change. Focus on the first part, how we connect through relationships. Sociology begins with everyday life, how we relate to one another in families, friendships, communities. So it studies culture, communication, the process of socialization, and how we learn to live as members of society. So this part covers topics like family, culture, community, interaction, socialization, and so on. The second part is how we organize life through institutions. As societies grow, relationships become more organized. We form institutions like education, religion, government, economy, media. These institutions and structures hold society together. They also set the rules of society. So this part in a way points to the macro-social phenomena. The next part is how we experience inequality and power. Society is not equal. There is inequality. Sociology studies how power and privilege are distributed through class, caste, gender, race, and many other hierarchies. It helps us understand why inequality exists and how people resist or reproduce it. This is a very important part of sociology. And the final part is how we reshape society through change. Here we are looking at social change, how new ideas, technologies, movements, generations transform the way we live. This part hints at modernity, globalization, and all the social issues we face today. So next time someone asks you what is sociology, start with the main line. Sociology is the study of how human beings live together, how we connect through relationships, organize life through institutions, experience inequality and power, and reshape society through change. And then you can talk about the subject matter of sociology. Sociology studies topics such as family, education, religion, inequality, culture, and social change. In short, sociology helps us understand how personal lives are connected to larger social structures. That's all you need to sound confident, complete, and clear.